lands. The scholars stood on they had come upon a Mesopotamian empire in the 3rd millennium BC. There was a leap backward of some 2,000 years from the Assyrian Sitchin of Shunkin to Sitchin of Akkad. And yet the mounds that were dug up brought to light literature and art, science, and politics, commerce, and communications, a full-fledged civilization, long before the appearance of Babylonia and Assyria. Moreover, it was obviously the predecessor and the source of the later Mesopotamian civilizations. Assyria and Babylonia were only branches off the Akkadian trunk. The mystery of such an early Mesopotamian civilization deepened, however, as inscriptions recording the achievements and genealogy of Sitchin of Akkad were found. They stated that his full title was King of Akkad, King of Kish. They explained that before he assumed the throne, he had been a counselor to the rulers of Kish. Was there, then, the scholars asked themselves, an even earlier kingdom, that of Kish, which preceded Akkad? Once again, the biblical verses gained in significance. And Cush begot Nimrod. He was first to be a hero in the land, and the beginning of his kingdom Babel, and Erech and Akkad. Many scholars have speculated that Sitchin of Akkad was the biblical Nimrod. If one reads Kish for Cush in the above biblical verses, it would seem Nimrod was indeed preceded by Kish, as claimed by Sitchin. The scholars then began to accept literally the rest of his inscriptions. He defeated Uruk and tore down its wall. He was victorious in the battle with the inhabitants of Ur. He defeated the entire territory from Lagash as far as the sea. Was the biblical Erech identical with the Uruk of Sitchin's inscriptions? As the site now called Warka was unearthed, that was found to be the case. And they're referred to by Sitchin was none other than the biblical Ur, the Mesopotamian birthplace of Abraham. Not only did the archaeological discoveries vindicate the biblical records, it also appeared certain that there must have been kingdoms and cities and civilizations in Mesopotamia even before the 3rd millennium BC. The only question was how far back did one have to go to find the first civilized kingdom? The key that unlocked the puzzle was yet another language. Scholars quickly realized that names had a meaning not only in Hebrew and in the Old Testament, but throughout the ancient Near East. All the Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian names of persons and places had a meaning. But the names of rulers that preceded Sitchin of Akkad did not make sense at all. The king, at whose court Sitchin was a counselor, was called Ababa. The king, who reigned in Erech, was named Lugal-Zajasi, and so on. Lecturing before the Royal Asiatic Society in 1853, Sir Henry Rawlinson pointed out that such names were neither Semitic nor Indo-European. Indeed, they seemed to belong to no known group of languages or peoples. But if names had a meaning, what was the mysterious language in which they had the meaning? Scholars took another look at the Akkadian inscriptions. Basically, the Akkadian cuneiform script was syllabic. Each sign stood for a complete syllable, a, b, ba, bat, etc. Yet the script made extensive use of signs that were not phonetic syllables, but conveyed the meanings God, city, country, or life, exalted, and the like. The only possible explanation for this phenomenon was that these signs were remains of an earlier writing method which used pictographs. Akkadian, then, must have been preceded by another language that used a writing method akin to the Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was soon obvious that an earlier language, and not less an earlier form of writing, was involved here. Scholars found that Akkadian inscriptions and texts made extensive use of loanwords, words borrowed intact from another language, in the same way that a modern Frenchman would borrow the English word weekend. This was especially true where scientific or technical terminology was involved, and also in matters dealing with the gods and the heavens. One of the greatest finds of Akkadian texts was the ruins of a library assembled in Nineveh by Ashurbanipal, Laird, and his colleagues carted away from the site 25,000 tablets, many of which were described by the ancient scribes as copies of olden texts. A group of 23 tablets ended with the statement 23rd tablet language of Sumer not changed. Another text bore an enigmatic statement by Ashurbanipal himself: the god of scribes has bestowed on me the gift of the knowledge of his art. I have been initiated into the secrets of writing. I can't even read the intricate tablets in Sumerian. I understand the enigmatic words in the stone carvings from the days before the flood. The claim by Ashurbanipal that he could read intricate tablets in Sumerian and understand the words written on tablets from the days before the flood only increased the mystery. But in January 1869, Jules Appert suggested to the French Society of Numismatics and Archaeology that recognition be given to the existence of a pre-Akkadian language and people, pointing out that the early rulers of Mesopotamia proclaimed their legitimacy by taking the title King of Sumer and Akkad. He suggested that the people be called Sumerians and their land, Sumer. Except for mispronouncing the name, it should have been Shumer, not Sumer. Appert was right. Sumer was not a mysterious, distant land, but the early name for southern Mesopotamia, just as the book of Genesis had clearly stated the royal cities of Babylon and Akkad and Erech were in the land of Shinar. Shinar was the biblical name for Shumer. Once the scholars had accepted these conclusions, the floodgates were opened. The Akkadian references to the olden texts became meaningful, and scholars soon realized that tablets with long columns of words were in fact Akkadian Sumerian lexicons and dictionaries, prepared in Assyria and Babylonia for their own study of the first written language, Sumerian. Without these dictionaries from long ago, we would still be far from being able to read Sumerian. With the raid, a vast literary and cultural treasure opened up. It also became clear that the Sumerian script, originally pictographic and carved in stone in vertical columns, was then turned horizontally, and, later on, stylized for wedge writing on soft clay tablets, to become the cuneiform writing that was adopted by the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and other nations of the ancient Near East. The decipherment of the Sumerian language and script, and the realization that the Sumerians and their culture were the fountainhead of the Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian achievements, spurred archaeological searches in southern Mesopotamia. All the evidence now indicated that the beginning was there. The first significant excavation of a Sumerian site was begun in 1877 by French archaeologists, and the finds from this single site were so extensive that others continued to dig there until 1933 without completing the job. Called by the natives Tello Mound, the site proved to be an early Sumerian city, the very Lagash of whose conquest Sitchin of Akkad had boasted. It was indeed a royal city, whose rulers bore the same title Sargon had adopted, except that it was in the Sumerian language and Shirai's ruler. The dynasty had started circa 2900 BC and lasted for nearly 650 years. During this time, 43 instances reigned without interruption in Lagash. Their names, genealogies, and lengths of rule were all neatly recorded. The inscriptions provided much information. Appeals to the gods to cause the grain sprouts to grow for harvest, to cause the watered plant to yield grain, attest to the existence of agriculture and irrigation. A cup inscribed in honor of a goddess by the overseer of the granary indicated that grains were stored, measured, and traded. An ANSI named Enatum left an inscription on a clay brick which makes it clear that these Sumerian rulers could assume the throne only with the approval of the gods. He also recorded the conquest of another city, revealing to us the existence of other city-states in Sumer at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC. Enatum's successor, Entemena, wrote of building a temple and adorning it with gold and silver, planting gardens, enlarging brick-lined wells. He boasted of building a fortress with watchtowers and facilities for docking ships. One of the better-known rulers of Lagash was Gudea. He had a large number of statuettes made of himself, all showing him in a votive stance, praying to his gods. This stance was no pretense. Gudea had indeed devoted himself to the adoration of Nengirsu, his principal deity, and to the construction and rebuilding of temples. His many inscriptions reveal that, in the search for exquisite building materials, he obtained gold from Africa and Anatolia, silver from the Taurus Mountains, cedars from Lebanon, other rare woods from Ararat, copper from the Zagros Range, diorite from Egypt, carnelian from Ethiopia, and other materials from lands as yet unidentified by scholars. When Moses built for the Lord God a residence in the desert, he did so according to very detailed instructions provided by the Lord. When King Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, he did so after the Lord had given him wisdom. The prophet Ezekiel was shown very detailed plans for the second temple in a God